Hey guys, my 914 is from 1974 and I don't think the rear suspension has been touched since then. The coils are sagging, the shocks really aren't doing their job. My car is dragging its rear end like a dog on the carpet, so it's time I do something about it. I've got new shocks and also a coilover kit that I got from Ground Control that I'll be putting in and restoring the OEM ride, or hopefully even a little bit better. Let's get started. This is what comes in the kit. This is the threaded sleeve and the lower perch, which you can adjust and then just tighten when you find the right height. This is a Bilstein or Bilstein shock, depending on where you're from. And notice that there are 6 cuts in the shock here, places where you can put the circlip to set the bottom level for this threaded sleeve, which you can see the lip right there. That's what's going to rest against the circlip. We're going to end up moving this up to the 4th one from the bottom. And then here are the springs. Really cool. I got the 150 weight. 100 is stock, but I wanted something a little bit sportier, and I might autocross this, so I want just something a little bit stiffer than stock. And then the hat, which goes on top of the spring, and we're going to zip tie the hat to the top of the spring, as you'll see in a bit. And we're going to take off the rear wheel here, just because it's going to provide a little bit more access to the shock area. Okay, the wheel's off, and you can see that I've got ancient KYB shocks here. The nickname for KYB is Kill Your Back. Now the shock itself is held in 2 places. From above, underneath this dust cap here, we've got to take off this nut. From below, you'll see this bolt goes through the shock and then through the rear arm and then terminates in a nut back here with a lock washer on it. Now you can't really get an impact socket into this nut because there's a little bend on this piece here. So I'm just going to use a large 27mm spanner. All right. The hardest turn is the first turn. Eventually, as things loosen up, I'll have to put a vice grip on this side just to keep things tight. Now, when it comes to this nut, the top nut, I find that you really need to use something like an impact to get that off, because you need something that's just going to take the nut off fast and not get hung up in the rubber and the bushings and twist the springs. Okay, made quick work of that. We're going to reuse these parts here, not the nut, but definitely keep track of it all. Now you notice that when I took the nut off of this, the whole shock dropped down with the arm. And since I already loosened this nut, I'm now in a good position to take this large bolt out. And since the arm dropped down, it's no longer under tension from above. So crack the nut, then take off the top one, and then come down and remove the bolt. And then the whole mechanism will come out. Loosen this up, and now it's time to take the nut off. And the large lock washer as well. Now to get this large bolt out, I'm just going to use this spanner in here and leverage it a little bit. And there we have it. All right, now we have the old KYB assembly on the bench. And I'm going to show you that we're going to need to keep this part here, which is the threaded cap. We'll also keep this rubber bushing. You can replace it as well, but this seems to be in pretty good shape. So we'll take that off. And in order to take that off, we've got to compress the springs because they are under pressure here. You need a spring compressor, and this is just a simple one I got at Harbor Freight. And you get it kind of to the close to the size that you want. You always do them in pairs. So just get this kind of snugged up, and then you can lock these pins, which keep the spring from snapping back at you in case something fails. And then I'll do exactly the same thing on the other side of the spring, opposite it, right here. and we'll take it over to the vise so that we can start to clamp this tight. Our pins are locked and we've got these compressors equal on both sides. We're just going to tighten them up, and we'll go about an inch on each side, and then we'll hit the other one. Okay, now we can see that the spring is turning in here, so there's less pressure on this. We can probably take this part off now. I don't want to compress the spring more than I have to. Now that pressure is off the hat, we can remove this piece, which we need to reuse. I'm just going to use a vice grip and loosen it up. There you go. We're also going to keep this. And there's the hat, which we won't need anymore. Now we're going to take the pressure off of these springs because you don't want to leave them like this any longer than you have to under tension. These are not super compressed springs, but they can still give you a nice smack if you're not careful. And we're also going to grab this bump stop too. We're going to cut it down, but we'll need it. Okay, here are all the parts that we're going to reuse from the old shock setup. First, this washer will go on, and then this, and then we're going to reuse that. This is the part that goes inside the trunk, and the nut for the shock absorber is going to go on top of that. And of course, this is the large bolt that goes through the control arm. I cleaned everything up, and if anything looked a little flat or worn, I would definitely replace it, but this looks just fine. On this bump stop here, we don't need quite such a big bump stop. So we're going to cut it right here at this crease and just use the top part as called for in the ground control instructions. We'll just cut through this right at the seam. And that cut pretty cleanly. That's all we need. Now here on the shock we've got our 6 grooves, and it comes with the circlip in the lowest groove, but we're going to put it up in here, and I'm just going to use like a piston ring compressor tool to open this up and then just move it. I'll just walk it up, and I'll have to use that tool a few times to just get it into position. There we go. Alright, now we've got the circlip in the right spot. How did I know it was the right spot? Well, I did the other side before and tried to get it close to lined up, so I knew where it was going to be. Alright, let's get started with the assembly now. So we have the circlip firmly on that 4th ring from the bottom, and then we're going to slide the threaded collar, the bottom part where the stop is. You can see that it hits home right on that ring, and we can adjust things by moving this back and forth, but we know we're going to have to be kind of close to the top. Ground control recommends that this lower perch be somewhat close to the top of this threaded collar when the adjustment's done, so that the spring doesn't interfere with the collar itself. I know some people like to try to get it more in the middle, but according to ground control it should be closer to the top. And I'm going to get the cable ties set now. And just snip off the excess. Sometimes I like to burn them a little bit too, so that this isn't a sharp edge and it doesn't hurt anybody later. Now that I've got the spring zip tied to the hat, I'm going to take our bump stop and slide that down. Really easy to forget. And then the spring. We'll make sure that's nice and down and through. And now that the adjusting sleeve is down against the perch and the spring is on, and this is pretty far down, we're going to take this washer and put the washer back on. And then this retaining piece that we took from the stock setup, or at least the KYB setup. I want to make sure this is down as far as it can comfortably go, because I need a lot of thread coming through in the trunk to put the nut on. And once that's together, next is this piece, which we've also salvaged from the old setup. And now that's ready to go into the car. So here's the full assembly, and you can see that the spring does not touch the lower perch. That is, according to ground control, totally normal. That's what's supposed to happen. It's different in a coilover setup than it is in a straight spring setup that's OEM, so that when the wheels come down, this will seat perfectly and all will be well. Now, everybody's 914 is obviously different. I know from the other side on my car that right around here is where it's going to end up being. Also, one turn of this adjusting ring equals 1/8 of an inch up or down. Now, if you just want to change out the shocks and keep the old style setup, either with the old springs or with new springs, it's pretty much the same deal. You just have to use the spring compressor to compress things down, reassemble the unit, and then put it in the car. And you may have a little trial and error with where to put the perch, but other than that, it's pretty much the same operation. And I think it's easier to get this set up in here with the nut on loosely before you put the control arm part in, because if you put the control arm part in first, you've got to lift the control arm up in order to get it in here. So we definitely want to put this in first. And that's what I'll do right now. I'll take this assembly, shove it in under the car. And there we have loosely in. Here's what it looks like from below. You can see that the control arm is lower here, and I'm going to have to lift this up to get it into position. We'll start this. Just get it through, and then we'll lift up the control arm until we get it in the hole. And now we'll just get our lock washer and nut into position and start to get everything tightened up. Now, the Bilstein instructions say do not use an impact wrench to tighten these because you might damage the shock. So, and now we'll torque this up to between 36 and 43 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go to 40. Now, as we get closer to the top, this is going to want to spin, so I'm just going to get a pipe wrench and hold it steady. And there we go. And our threads are poking up through the top of the nut with the seal on it. We're good to go. And once again, we're all tightened down, and you can see that the spring does not hit the bottom perch with the wheel in the air, although it will once it comes down. I'm also using a Sharpie here to make a mark on the nut across the top of the shock mount, just to make sure that this isn't going to shift over time. And if it does, I'll be able to tell immediately. Now, to fine tune the ride height, what we're looking for is for the center of the hub here to be approximately on the same line as the top of the rocker cover here. At least that's how they were set up OEM. Now, you can use a string strung between those 2 points, or you can use a large flat edge like this, which I think is a little bit easier. And you can see that this is probably just a little bit high. The car's sitting just a little bit high. So I want to take it down about 1/4 of an inch or so, maybe 3 turns, so that it's about here. 1, 2, 3, and that gets us about 1/3 of an inch lower, which is what I was looking for. And now I'll use the Allen key to tighten it all down. Now it's going to look like it's moving back and forth, but it's not the perch that's moving. If you look really closely, it's the whole sleeve. That's not going to happen once the car gets lowered onto the perch. So we're good here. Now I just have to do that on the other side. And now the straight edge goes right through the center of the wheel. Looks like we're in good shape. Now we just got to test drive it and make sure all is well. There you go. I can't believe the difference in the quality of the ride, and it really didn't take very long, maybe only a couple hours total to do the whole job. If you liked this video, you found it helpful, please subscribe to my channel and definitely give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. Be safe and enjoy.